Hello and welcome to CS230. This is lecture 24 and this is lesson 3. In this lesson I'm going to show you how to use AngularJS to consume a RESTful API. We previously used ExpressJS in conjunction with jQuery and Bootstrap and handlebars in order to build a UI for our quotations database that was accessible by a RESTful API, also implemented by JS. Now, I sometimes feel probably that the separation between the RESTful API and the actual user interface that consumed that RESTful API might not have been really clear when you just use Express for everything. But at least in the last lesson, I was able to show you how you could use ExpressJS to consume the fake data that came from the JSON server RESTful API as well. So this you should see it's possible, but now this is a clear break between the two. So what I'd like to be able to show you is that we could use AngularJS to consume some RESTful API then, and a much clearer separation between the API and the interface. So we're going to be using AngularJS 9 for this, and in order to make it work, we have to set up the Angular command line interface tools, and we installed those using npm. So I've done that already, obviously, because I've got an example working. But you know, if you want to do it, you just say npm install Angular at Angular CLI. And what I did as well is I just generated a small alias for the the Angular command to do the setup and manage our app. So you can check the version that you're using ng version to make sure it's installed properly, and I have that working. It installs quite a lot of packages to get you set up already. And so so what I wanted to do is, I have one running, and I'll show you already. I have one running. So here's our original database, and here is an Angular app, which is an Angular table, and it looks very similar to the one here that we have, you know, with our updates and deletes. And but you'll notice that it's using the fake data that it's taking from the API that's running here. Okay, the RESTful API is running here. So we had it set up already. Our Angular app is running in this window here. My original database is running here, and I probably could just change the app in some way to tell it very quickly. So I could tell it dynamically, actually, to start consuming the API that we have. So we need to look at what's a file. It's called a data service file, okay, and which tells us where we find our data in an app. And you'll see it. I got it set up. I'm looking at port 3200, and I'll just change it to port 3000, save this, and we can go back and see that we're still running here. We didn't make any changes, and we'll pop back to our app, and we'll notice that we immediately connected to the API. So we can switch between the API very easily and do our displays with Angular as well, like as we could with any other service. Okay, so let's see how we go about doing some of this work. Quite a bit of work involved, really, in getting set up. I created an Angular quotations directory, a new project here. I'm using the ng new, and that was fine. And then I added some routing in here, and I said I was going to work with style sheets. So it creates a whole bunch of files here. And really, what happens is that Angular sets up this default app for you, and it's quite straightforward. So if we look at this, I'll just copy this here. Okay, well, we won't copy it exactly because we want to overwrite any existing files. I'll go into my demo here, I'll paste this, and I say yes, I want to have my routing, and I just accept the CSS, which is fine. And I start creating all these files and installing packages, and that's this node thing going on in the background sets up all these packages for us and makes it work. And we get a default Angular app that runs on port 4200. It creates a whole bunch of directories for us. You can see lots and lots of them, and then all this work is going on, as you can see already. And what happens ultimately is we get this default app that runs for us on port 4200. Okay, and really what I'm doing, and what you'll notice I've done, is I've just replaced all the inside of this app with the component that I wanted, which was a table component. So that's fairly straightforward. So let's go back and see how we're doing in terms of time here. And we're still installing packages down here. It'll be a little while longer yet. And when it's done, we'll be able to get the app running on 3400. And we already have one running on 3400 here. We're done. Okay, we're done down here. So let's kill this one. Okay, and let's start this one. And then you can see the command that we'd have used to uses ng-serve, so we just do the same thing in here. So we now, of course, yeah, because we need to be in the directory that runs it, so I couldn't run it, so we have to go into our directory which we created, and it was called Angular new. Okay, so let's go in here, and now we'll serve the app that sits in here. Sorry. So we should be running in shortly. It needs to compile and get everything running. A little bit of work happening the first time these things start. You can see all this compiling is going on. And a lot of the compiling has to happen because Angular, for example, would not use JavaScript by default for any of the executable components here. It will use TypeScript, and then it will compile the TypeScript into JavaScript and be able to use that then as it runs. So a lot happening down here, but we're ready to go, and so it's fine. So it's running, and it tells us it's running on 4200, unsurprisingly, because we expected that to happen by default. And let's reload this, and we get a standard Angular app, and it's our Angular new app running, and that's fine. Really what we want to do now is we'll replace all of these bits in the middle, all these components here, with our table that we saw displayed a little bit earlier. So I'll just back here, I'll kill this app version, and I'll go back and run this one up here. So now we're running again, and we're pointing at what data are we pointing at? Let's have a look. Okay, so well, obviously it's nothing happening currently, but it will restart and redisplay once it gets a. Okay, so we're pointing at the data from our RESTful API. Let's point it at the data from our fake, which maybe we've done already, but let's do it anyway, so that we're back again. We have a good lot of data to play with then for looking at data tables a little bit later. So yeah, I was here, so I'll just I'll point to 3200, this file here. I'll save this, and hopefully when we go back, we should be, yeah, so now we've got the data, we've got lots of data, we want to play this a bit there. Okay, so how do we get this table component working within Angular? There's a good bit of setup to do, because it's a complex table. So the table sits here, and it has a data source, and so the data is driven by our RESTful API. So we need to tell Angular, where the source is, how to make the connection to that source using the RESTful API. So we have to use a HTTP client module here in order to make that happen. And then we have to tell it how to display. We want to have some kind of, you'll notice that we'll be using Bootstrap stuff here. And later we'll be using and building a data table. So we want to make that work as well. So we have to install all of this extra module stuff. So let's go back to our guide to see how we do this. So I like some modules. I tend to use jQuery a lot and Bootstrap. So we'll install those using npm and add them to a project using save. Okay, and that will add it to our project, so we'll have them available to our Angular app. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff that we'll install. For example, we'll install some data tables modules. We'll install some more jQuery for data tables, some extra Bootstrap, the font awesome, and Popper, all of these things that we will use. And then we also update the standard Angular.json. So we have a package.json that will be included, of course, because it's a Node project. Then we'll have our AngularJSON, and that allows us to be able to integrate Bootstrap and jQuery with the Angular and also our data table stuff. So you can see it's here. I add there's a style section in the Angular.json file and a script section in the Angular.json file, and I add those to it. And we can go and have a quick peek, I guess. Angular.json, and we'll see here's the styles and here's the scripts, and I added these in, okay, and these are routes to where they're installed in my particular project. Good. So what happens next? Okay, so we need to add a component. We said that we were interested in adding a table component, and we use a command to do this, the ng-generate component, and then we give the component the name. Okay, so I'm interested in the table, so I'm lazy, so I just said let's ng-generate a component called table in the Angular quotations directory, wherever you create it. It creates these files, table.component.html, table.component.ts. They're core for us. We want to be able to make and manipulate those, because it will tell us how the TS essentially will be the JavaScript that tells us how our component behaves, and the table component.html will tell us how it looks. Look, I could have called it anything, but like tables just seem to make sense. You know, if you have more than one table, you could have the name of the table. I could have said quotations display or whatever I wanted, but I'm just calling it table here. Okay, and as I mentioned earlier, our table has to have a service, so it needs to know where it's going to get the data from, because we have to have this binding between the data in the service and what's displayed. And so we generate a data service. So we say ng generate service called data, and so the file is data.service. .ts is a core file that's happening here, and that really tells us a little bit about you know, how we're going to have the service. We're going to basically set up a connection via HTTP to the RESTful API, and it's a bit like we did previously with Ajax within jQuery, so it's no different really. But in order to make that happen, we actually, by default, we don't use the HTTP client module, so we have to install that module into our project that we're using. And the project resources are in this file called app.module.ts. So we add this, and you'll see it's here, okay? And you'll notice that this table component would have been added already to this app as soon as we use the ng generate component command earlier. And then so now I see the table component here, and now I see that my HTTP client module is here. So I had to make these changes myself. And I did this in the modules.ts, and we can just go and have a peek at the modules.ts, and I certainly added this line here for HTTP client module. Okay, and I added the HTTP client module down here as well. So that would be necessary for us to be able to make these RESTful calls with our Ajax. It is Ajax, of course, with our Angular app. So that was a first start, and then we needed to get sorted with the data service and the table display. So we work with the service first. So what happens here is that we have our data service, and that involves importing and injecting the client, okay, as a private instance, which we're going to call HTTP client. Okay, so we define our API server here as well. So you know that's how we import. We need these, and then we set up a class, and then that includes information about our server, and we've changed this already. We can point to wherever we want API by just changing this one here, and then we have a little constructor, and then we're going to say, you know, how we're going to have something called a send get request, and that would be a method that we're providing to our service as part of our service, that implements a get request to this. So it's, you know, that's a bit like routing in a way. Okay, so when that service component is available, we can use it. Like I said, we create an instance of this in our table command. That's our data service in general, and we want to use that data service in our table service. So you can imagine this sets up all the core background stuff for doing and working with a RESTful API. Then we use that RESTful API in the table service as well. So that's just an instance of that, because we might have multiple tables making multiple requests. Okay, and then so it's fine, and it's not too difficult. What it does is it basically provides and returns this variable called items array that contains the data that's been retrieved, and we know that that's just a list of JSON. Okay, so that's nice to be able to have that. So basically that's how it works. So we can have a look at the code. We can see that we have all those set up. Sorry, I'm just trying to get across some of these here. Okay, so there's our table service being used. Okay, and it's not bad. We have our items array, and we have so we need to be able to use that a little bit there, and our data service is set up here as well. We saw that already, so it's all working just fine. So the last thing we want to do is to actually display the data returned by the service, and then we use we basically now have this set up as an Angular component, our table component. And in fact, what it does, it was called table, so we have a root for this. So this becomes a component called table root, and we also have that included in our HTML. So let me just find it here. Sometimes these things move around for me on me, and I think I might have actually just deleted that one, have I? Okay, so here it is. Okay, so what's happened is that we saw, if you remember correctly, that previously we ended up having the original default display, and we wanted to replace that display. So here's the header in the HTML that Angular uses by default, and here's the footer, and I've included the table component that we've just generated here, table-root. If we called it quotations component, it would be called quotations-root. So So that installs it at this point here. So that's how we install our Angular component. And the next thing we want to be able to do is we want to be able to look at the actual, what that component looks like. So we're setting it up as a container. These are Bootstrap commands. Here's a table. And we're able to use the Angular ng-for command to iterate over items array, okay, those data, and then we display the quotation and the author information, much as we did when we were working with the handlebars view template earlier. Okay, so they all work in a similar way, of course, unsurprisingly. Okay, so that's it. So that should be fine, and that allows us to be able to generate our table that we had that looks like this, and it's all up and running, and it's grand, works fine. Okay. Now, one thing we can do, and which would be nice, is to use data tables, which handles, because in my previous example, I had lots of, I managed and handled a lot of this searching manually. I didn't do pagination at all. I could have done pagination as well, but I never got around to doing that. Would be useful. We'd like to have it. Well, and rather than writing all the code from scratch, we can use a data table that provides all those information for us. And so Bootstrap has some nice display of those as well, and we can maybe start looking at some of that kind of stuff. So what I want to be able to do then is basically get a table. And we need to start looking at some of the other modules that I included earlier. You remember I said I installed some stuff. So we need to include some modules to deal with data tables. So I have to add this data tables module, okay, to our app.module.ts. And then I have to, for our table component, then I need to add some extra information to be able to work with tables and data tables. So I'm going to do that next. And then I'm going to say in my HTML that I have to make a data table rather than the regular table. So these are just Bootstrap and data table commands that we can class as information that we can add to the table command. So let's do that. Let me go through the files. Data service doesn't need to change. The app component doesn't need to change. The AngularJS doesn't need to change. Table component, yes, we're working with data tables, so we need to be able to say that we're going to use this data tables variable here. I'm going to do some settings here for the data tables. We want to say, page length is true, the kind of processing we're having. You can look up the GitHub that's in the link in the resource file with this lesson to be able to find the detail here. So that looks okay. Let's save this. Now that's that file. We need to have a look at our table components. So we're going to actually make this a data table. So I'm going to copy this here. I'm going to comment out our original and put it here. So now we're working with data tables, and we're using the commands that we would expect for the data tables CSS here. So that's that one. Now there's a couple of other small changes I have to make. I have a feeling I'm missing a file. Let's get this. Yeah, we're going to look at some data tables here as well. As we said, we want to import data table, and we want to work with data tables here. So I think those are all the changes. Okay, I mean, I could have typed all these in, but in terms of speed, I have them there in prep already, and we have we should have it working fine. But you never know. Okay, that's not happened yet. So let's go back to make sure we've saved every single thing. That's fine. That's fine. Save this. Save this. Save this. Save this. All those files look like they could be good. We should get some errors appearing here. Okay, no, it's done some compiling, so it's changing all this. Like, it did have some errors when we started looking at this originally because it's dynamically updating, but everything seems to be compiling okay. And so now we have our data tables displayed. So you can see that dynamic changing that happens with this. 2, 3, 4, 1. But sometimes it doesn't behave when I switch to 25, but yeah, it's fine. Okay, so there we have a data table set up. It's styled with Bootstrap. It's using consuming our RESTful API, and it all worked very nicely with Angular. Great, so that's how we do it. A bit of work involved in setting up your Angular project, a little bit of time and understanding the model of how everything works and hangs together and what components you need to install and when and so forth to make it work. But you can incrementally build it and you get some nice results. Okay, thank you very much for watching.